live from the Scheinfeld Center Innovator Studio at Santa Barbara City College. It's the Enlightened Entrepreneurship Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Sampson, Director of the Scheinfeld Center, and thank you for joining us here to build livelihoods that matter, be your own boss, and make the world an even better place. Well, here's the situation. We are top performers, leaders, entrepreneurs who want to master our time, habits, and mindset to get the most out of our effort towards the objectives that we hold important. Every day, we take about 25,000 breaths, mostly without thinking. Can we harness our breath to amplify our performance? Neuroscience shows us that we can, so let's get into it. Joining us to break it down is Elsa Unenge, who is a certified breath coach and focuses on functional breathing to improve mental and physical health. Elsa, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for taking the time.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, your help with individuals and companies to breathe in ways that help us to be happier, healthier, as well as manage anxiety and improve sleep, increase performance. That's so important, especially these days. And you're able to break down the science behind breathing to get people motivated to improve their breath for the rest of their lives. So that all sounds wonderful. And let's jump right in, maybe starting from there. As you said, every day we take about 25,000 breaths. Beyond delivering oxygen throughout the body and expelling carbon dioxide, why do we breathe? What are the life-supporting effects on the body?
Yeah, so breathe. If we don't breathe, we die. That's a very simple answer. So you can think of how long you can go without food, but still surviving. We can go for weeks without food and still be alive. We can go about days without water, but we can only go about 3 to 5 minutes without air, so without oxygen. So it's simply the most important thing to keep us alive. And I've heard that 90% of our energy comes from oxygen and about 10% comes from food and water. So just to put it in perspective. So it creates energy, it's delivered to our muscles so we can function and work and move and talk and live.
Yeah, okay, great. And it's so amazing breathing in that, our bodies manage this just automatically, but then we also are able to control it. I think it's really interesting that we have both of those capacities in our bodies. So maybe could you share with us a bit about how breathing is regulated in the body?
So a lot of us thinks that oxygen is the trigger behind every breath. So we think that we take each new breath because we lack oxygen. We haven't breathed for a while or breathed for a while, so we need to breathe again to get oxygen. But it's actually the trigger behind each breath is carbon dioxide. So when we hold our breath, for example, or when we breathe very slow or all the time, carbon dioxide is building up in our system. And it's this buildup of carbon dioxide that triggers us to breathe. The brain can sense that we have high levels of carbon dioxide. So it sends through the phrenic nerve a signal down to our diaphragm. So for those who are not familiar with the diaphragm, it's our main breathing muscle. It sits just under our ribs and over our belly. And it looks like an umbrella or a little dome shape, like my hands, sort of. So this is the movement of the diaphragm, and it moves automatically for us to be able to breathe, to give space for the lungs to expand and to push to reduce space so the air is breathed out. And so it's a signal that goes down to the diaphragm to contract and move down to breathe in. So that's sort of the functions behind automatic breathing. But then, as you said, we can also take control over our breath. And it's one of the only automatic functions in our body that we can actually take control of, but also let go, and it happens automatically. So yeah, the most important takeout from this is that it's the increase of carbon dioxide that triggers us to breathe. So if you're listening to this now, you can exhale, hold your breath, and then you wait for that feeling of wanting to take in more air. That's because you have too much CO2 in your system. It's when the oxygen drops too low, that's when oxygen can trigger breathing, but then that's extreme cases.
What are the mechanics of a proper breath? Like if it's optimal, how does that work? What are the mechanics of it?
Yeah, so it's very much centered around the diaphragm, as I mentioned, because that's our main breathing muscle. And so our lower ribs, so I'll shift my camera. So if I grab hold of my lower ribs, so not up here where you also have ribs, but the lowest ribs, this is the area that you want to expand when you inhale and contract when you exhale. You can also feel your belly moving out when you inhale and moving in when you exhale. So if you're listening, you can place one hand on your belly, one hand on your chest, and you can notice where you feel your breath. So many people might feel their breath in their chest. So their chest going out when you inhale, maybe belly even going in when you inhale. So it goes like this when you inhale instead of this. So the chest should be fairly still when we inhale and exhale. Some people might also feel their shoulders going up when they inhale. So when we breathe up into our chest and we feel our shoulders and neck tension, we use accessory breathing muscles that are not tend to be overly used with every breath, because we are supposed to use our diaphragm. So a proper breath is using the diaphragm, and you can sense that by feeling your lower ribs expand, lower ribs contract when you exhale, or feeling your belly moving out and in. So out on the inhale and in on the exhale, not the opposite. So some people do the opposite. And then you want to make sure you breathe through your nose. So before I got into breathing, I didn't really know that we were supposed to breathe through our nose and really not breathe through our mouth. I didn't know that was a difference. But our nose has more than 30 functions for breathing. For example, filtering, changing the temperature of your breath, moisten the air that comes in. It sterilizes the air. So the nose prepares the air for our lungs. And if you breathe in through your mouth, for example, you breathe in cold, dirty, dusty, raw air straight into your lungs, and that can create irritation, inflammation, and it's not good long term to breathe in all this raw, dusty, dirty air. So yeah, nose, belly, I would say belly or lower ribs. And the third one is to breathe a little less or slow. So you want to slow down your breath. You don't want to hear yourself breathing. If you hear yourself breathing right now, you are breathing a little bit too fast. So this is where it gets a little complicated, but you can think that a lot of us are over breathing and it's a bad thing. And if you think, oh, but we need to breathe, we need more, the more oxygen, the better. Sort of, but you breathe in 21% oxygen because the air has 21% oxygen, and you actually breathe out 16.4%. So you can't absorb all the oxygen you breathe in anyways. So when we overbreathe, it's similar to like, okay, we need food to survive, but if we eat too much, it's bad for us. Or if we eat the wrong things, it's bad for us. Same goes with breathing. You don't want to breathe too much, or you don't want to breathe in the wrong way, because then it gets bad for us. Without going into too much detail, but maybe we'll get there.
I've heard that breathing through the mouth, so mouth breathers, that it even changes their facial structure. I saw on the internet, people who had switched that and kind of the before and after effects. I don't know how much time had to pass for that to change, one way or the other. But have you heard of this, or have you seen this in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to show what you mean with changing the face. So I'll just show, it will look a little funny, but my face is pretty straight. Everything goes on a straight line. But if you start to mouth breathe too much, you maybe mouth breathe during the sleep, you might start to not chew proper food. This whole section can change, and it's especially sensitive to change when you develop your face. So up until 18 years old, or especially before 12 years old, but your face is still growing or changing till 18. So it's especially important on those years. But if you start to breathe through your mouth too much, your face can change this way.
Yeah.
So everything will go back. So yes, breathing through your mouth and chewing as well can impact how your whole facial structure is changing. Also, crooked teeth comes to that. Like, so just quickly, your correct tongue position should be in the roof of your mouth. So like this, not really like this, but this. So you should like just place your tongue in the roof of your mouth like this. That's a proper tongue position. And if you think of your teeth, they go around your tongue if your tongue is like that. But if you don't have your tongue there, if you breathe through your mouth, you can try and keep your tongue there and breathe through your mouth. You won't succeed. Then your teeth, they don't have a sort of like support from your tongue, so they will start to lean back in, and they will give less space for the teeth, and they will start to grow crooked. So that's one way behind crooked teeth.
That's so amazing. I mean, I never really thought about our tongues and how important they are to the support of the teeth, you know.
The tongue position, you're like, how can it matter how you have your tongue? But they have done studies when people have their tongue in the roof of their mouth and at the bottom and middle, and they have seen when they have the roof in the top of their mouth, I think they did like a functional movement test, and they were moving in a different way than when they had their tongue in the lower position. So it impacts everything in your body, impacts everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you said, you know, sometimes people can be mouth breathers at night. And actually, I have experienced this occasionally if I'm, you know, if my nose is stuffy or something, and just naturally in my sleep, I'm, you know, begin mouth breathing. And, you know, I can tell when I wake up, if that has happened. It doesn't happen a lot, but I can tell when it has, because my mouth will be super dry. But I've also noticed that kind of my state of mind, I kind of feel just not like I normally feel, like, okay, ready to go, let's get the day going. But it kind of, yeah, just feel kind of off. Is that, does breathing through the mouth also affect our mind as opposed to breathing through the nose?
Yeah, so they have done studies on that too. They have tried a group when they breathe through their mouth and when they breathe through their nose, and they did different tests. They did a memory test. So they saw that if you breathe through your nose, you remember things better. They also did a reaction test. So they reacted faster on a test and had more accurate answer when they breathed through their nose. There was maybe something else, but yeah, so it's directly linked to our cognition and our memory, and also our overall health, because when you breathe through your mouth, you tend to breathe faster, simply because the hole in your mouth or in your nose, they are smaller. So you breathe with 50% more resistance when you breathe through your nose compared to your mouth. So when you breathe through your mouth, you breathe faster, and the faster you breathe, the more you signal to your brain that you're in stress. So our body can't relax properly to go into deep sleep or proper REM sleep. So it affects your sleep quality if you breathe through your mouth. But it's also, you get more dehydrated from breathing out through your mouth, because you lose 42% more water when you exhale through your mouth. So there's a lot of things going on in nose breathing. It's simply just how we human plus all animals are designed to breathe. So you go out in nature or check some program on TV and see how animals are breathing. You rarely see them breathe through the mouth if they're not regulating their temperature. So dogs, for example, open their mouth to sweat, but we sweat through our skin, so we don't have to really open our mouth. I mean, we have to, because we've gone so used to breathing through the mouth because it's easier. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. So we've talked about some of the maladaptive ways of breathing. Let's kind of switch to, like, what are the top short-term and long-term wellness benefits that we can experience if we are breathing optimally?
So if we're breathing optimally, you can experience better sleep, better concentration, better reduced anxiety, reduced stress. You can manage your nervous system. So if you're feeling stressed, anxious, or nervous, for example, you can use your breath in the moment to switch on your calming nervous system. If you're feeling too tired and you have an exam or whatever it is coming up and you need more energy, you can use deliberately breathing faster to get energy up. If you need to be super focused, you can use a breath technique to make you come into a flow state, for example. So those are just some short-term benefits. And the long-term benefits is just simply overall health, reduced injury. So if you're breathing functionally, you also have better functional movement. So functional movement is just all the movements we do throughout our day. So we might bend forward, we might reach up, we might twist over to something. So if you have less functional, or if you have dysfunctional breathing, it actually impacts your functional movement. So it has again, everything is connected, and especially to the breath. They have also seen links between dysfunctional breathing and asthma, dysfunctional breathing and obesity, cardiovascular disease. So blood pressure is can be linked to breathing. Stress. I could go on and on, but yeah, those are some of the benefits.
As we're talking, it's just so amazing to me that we aren't taught about the power of our breath from the beginning as kids, because of the impact that it can have. And how is it that here I am at this stage of my life and just learning, oh, wow, well, I can use my breath to actually really help me get to what I want to do and the things that I want to experience, right? So yeah, thank goodness. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And there's this thing that happens where when we are concentrating really hard at something, a lot of us are in front of our screens, for a good part of the day, where the breathing becomes compromised. Like I've had this, where sometimes I'll be working and my consciousness will kind of come to my breath, and literally I don't know how I'm sitting upright because it seems like I'm not breathing. My chest isn't moving, my belly isn't really moving. It's like, what is going on? So why does this happen? After I've talked with people, it's like, oh yeah, I've noticed that as well. So why does it happen, and what is the effect on the body and mind, and performance when we're doing that?
Yeah, so there's something called email apnea. And it was they came up with the term when they were like studying people who were sitting and working in front of their laptops, and they saw how they stopped breathing. So it's linked to stress. If we still feel stressed, we tend to signal again to the brain that we are in danger, or that something is happening and that we should get activated. And so you start to breathe faster from simply getting the signals from your brain that you're stressed. And then you breathe faster, and then you signal back up to the brain that you are stressed. Otherwise, you wouldn't be breathing this fast. So the brain is constantly like observing what we do in our body, how our body is moving. So with our breath, for example. So it's both communication back and forth. And it's actually through nerves from the brain to the body. 80% of all the signals goes from the body to the brain, actually. So it's not just our brain saying what our body should do. It's something we do automatically, and then we signal up to the brain. But if you think of, you walk across the street and a car is approaching super fast that you didn't see coming. What do you do with your breath? Maybe so I was gonna say have a think, but maybe it doesn't come to you straight away. But what I would do is I would watch the car and I would hold my breath after the inhale. So email apnea, but in the real situation. And I would hold my breath after the inhale until I would notice that I'm safe. Then I would go So we exhale when we are relaxed, and we inhale when we need to be prepared, ready for danger, for example. So that's an example of what happens when we're stressed. We might tend to hold our breath, or we might breathe faster from being stressed. And this changes things in our body. So it increases respiration, blood pressure. We breathe more because we're so stressed. We breathe out a lot of carbon dioxide. And what carbon dioxide does is that it helps to open up blood vessels to improve blood flow. So the opposite happens. We breathe a lot when we sit in front of a computer because we're stressed. So we start to maybe mouth breathe even. We exhale a lot of CO2, and the opposite happens. The blood vessels constrain and less blood can go to the brain. So we are less focused and we can't think as straight, and we are under this fight or flight state.
Yeah, so we often hear this thing, so talking about getting stressed and breathing, we often hear this advice where people say, oh, you're stressed, take a deep breath. Is that good advice? Should we follow that?
I would say both yes and no. I'll explain. So if you who are listening to this, take a couple of deep breaths as I talk and notice what you're doing. So if right now you're taking deep breaths and you might be feeling your chest moving, you might be taking a big breath. So a lot of people take deep breaths like this. So you saw my shoulders were like dropping from going up, and I felt my chest moving, and I heard my breath. So I was breathing faster. Otherwise I would not hear my breath. And I felt my chest expand, and I was breathing out through the mouth. So if you do this when you do deep breathing, I would say no, it's not a good idea to do when you're stressed, because what do these breaths do? They actually send signals to the brain that you are stressed, because otherwise you wouldn't be breathing this fast, big up in your chest. So chest breathing is also linked to stress, rather than belly breathing is linked to calming. So you send the wrong signals to your brain. But if it's maybe so if the deep breath, if it's simply just deep down, far away from the top, if that's what you're thinking of when you think deep, and you take a very slow breath, so you breathe in through your nose, out through your nose, and you just feel your belly rise and fall, that kind of deep breath, simply meaning deep down, not big, not fast, not full, that breath I would recommend, because that sends calm to the brain. So if you're stressed, it's good to do slow, deep, or low breathing. So feeling your lower ribs expand and your belly, having your chest and shoulders relaxed. But then it also is this physiological sigh that you might have heard about. That is double inhale and a long exhale. So it's similar to a deep as in full breath, because you do this. You can breathe out through the mouth or through the nose, but then the exhale is very long. So the long exhale is calming, and the two inhales actually re-inflate your tiny, tiny air sacs that where oxygen goes into the blood and carbon dioxide goes into the lungs and out. So those are these tiny, tiny air sacs inside our lungs. They can deflate. So what this breath does is that it re-inflates these collapsed air sacs. So this can actually lower stress. But yes, it's a little detailed, but it's not good to do those deep breaths, because you will actually get more stressed, and because you breathe out oxygen, less air goes to the brain. So it has the complete opposite effect. But if it's like, and it's a very long exhale, those can be calming. But okay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And this kind of gets into, as high performers, we need to be able to modulate our energy. Sometimes we need to amp up our energy, like if we're getting ready to, do something, speak or something, or be on a podcast where, modulating energy is important. Sometimes we might need to calm. Sometimes we might need to balance. So how can we use breath in each of these circumstances, to enhance performance and our cognitive function, in any of these scenarios?
Yeah, so 3 different scenarios. So energy, relax, balance. And so you can notice how quickly you can change your heart rate with your breath. So you can actually take control over your heart rate with your breath. And if you find your pulse, if you're watching this, you can find your pulse somewhere on your throat or maybe on the side of your wrist. So if you can locate your pulse, you might start to notice that your pulse changes. The speed of your pulse changes when you inhale versus when you exhale. Just do a few breaths and see if you notice anything. If you're very stressed or anxious, you might not feel the difference. You might feel like your heartbeat is the same. But if you're calm and if you have a good balance of your nervous system, you will feel that your heart or your pulse connected to your heart is increasing when you inhale and that it decreases when you exhale. You felt it?
Yeah.
Cool. So that's how, and that just means that if you inhale longer and exhale shorter, you give more time and space for your heart to speed up because it speeds up when you inhale. So if you have a minute and you do more seconds of an inhale, that means your heart is speeding up more during that minute. So you can simply do a long inhale and a short exhale through the mouth because you want to get energized. So you're not thinking about calming down here. So that's why you can even do in through the mouth, out through the mouth to energize even faster. You can do up in your chest. It's not really good, but it's also stimulating. So you can do a long inhale and a short exhale and do a few of that, maybe a minute, and see if you feel the difference. So if you need energy, you can utilize your inhales. Same thing goes for exhale or for calming. So if you lengthen your exhales, which is where your heartbeat slows down, and shortening your inhales, you give more time for your heart to slow down. So you can just do a 4-second inhale or a 3-second inhale and a slow 6-second exhale or 8-second exhale, as long as you can think that the exhale should be twice as long as the inhale. So just long exhale, slow, this time through the nose only, not up in your chest. You want to calm down. You want to send signals to your brain to calm down. But if you're in between, you're like, I'm not too tired, I'm not too energized, but I feel like my brain is everywhere or my mind is scattered, then you can use both these techniques. So you make the inhale as long as the exhale, but you take control over that. So you breathe in, say for 5 seconds, just nose breath in, deep in your belly, and then you breathe out for 5 seconds. So that finds the balance between this fight or flight system, which is the inhale, stressful, energizing, and then your rest and digest system, which is when you exhale. So by balancing those, you can find a balancing breath practice.
Great. So those are 3 super helpful strategies that we can practice at no cost at any time.
Yeah, and you would feel it straight away. So it's like, yes, you're stressed now and you might go to yoga after work, or you might look forward to your holiday, or maybe you treat yourself with a massage, but you're very stressed now. But these are things you can okay, I'm feeling stressed now. I can't focus. I can't think. Okay, let's take 1 minute of doing one of these 3 practices, or maybe you'll do the slowing one if you're very stressed, and you can feel straight away an effect, and you might go back to work and you're like, I'm focused now, I can work, I'm not feeling as agitated about this task or something.
While you were talking, I was imagining, wow, this could be really important if we're in an interaction with somebody else and it's getting really activated and we feel ourselves getting activated. Seems like this would be this awareness, we've got 3 different ways to go. Do I need to stay balanced? Do I need greater relaxation on board? This is important because that'll affect the parts of our brain that are engaged, right? Because if we're breathing really, really quickly, like you were saying, our flight or fight response will be activated. And I think if I remember correctly, in those circumstances, our frontal cortex, the front of our brain where I believe you tell me if I'm wrong, our rational thinking happens, that we're short-circuiting ourselves that way. So having our breath be one of the first things that we go to kind of notice where we're at seems like a really powerful technique. Did I have that right, or am I wrong about the whole breathing and brain thing?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I can't confirm, but it sounds correct. But yeah, so you can choose what signals you want to send to your brain by simply picking one of these three breathing patterns, and you signal it straight away. So it's very like in real time tools that are super easy, and no one needs to see that you're even doing them. So they're always available to you.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into cognitive performance and motor performance. So the types of breathing, is there something that will optimize our cognitive performance and something that we can do that will enhance physical performance? I imagine it's based on these three techniques, but is there anything to focus on with that we can do with our breathing to enhance performance in both those ways?
Yeah, so physical support performance, if you start to know, say you go out for a run, for example, or you do any other sports where you can breathe through your nose, so like not swimming maybe, you should try and breathe through your nose as much as you can, because when you breathe through your nose, as I said, you breathe slower, which means you build up more CO2, and the more comfortable you get to higher levels of CO2, the slower you can breathe, because it takes longer time for that trigger to go off. Say your tolerance of CO2 is here, and you breathe, and then your trigger goes off. But if you push up your tolerance and it's up here, then it takes a longer time for your trigger to go off, which means you're breathing slower, which means you can breathe longer. Which means you can run for longer. So you improve your endurance by pushing up your CO2 tolerance. It gets a little complicated here, but so that's one thing you can do for physical performance to get more comfortable with this uncomfortable feeling that you maybe felt if you held your breath earlier and you felt your so-called air hunger building up. So nose breathing, I would especially recommend for athletes, and it will be super hard first time you try it. Your nose will run and you will be like, she's crazy, this cannot be right. But it's, again, you're going on an air diet. So think of food again. If you have eaten too much and you need to reduce weight for health benefits, you need to eat less, and it will be uncomfortable. Same with breathing. You need to breathe less and it will be uncomfortable until you get used to those levels. So, and for cognitive functions, again, coming back to nose breathing, super important. Keep your tongue in the roof of your mouth, breathe slower. If we're under stress and we are in an argument and we leave that argument and we come up with all these good things that we should have said, and like, oh, I should have said that, or why did I say this? It's because when we're highly stressed, we can't think properly. So coming back to that slow breathing before a task, for example. So I wouldn't hyperventilate before I go in and do a written test or something.
We have questions from the audience.
Okay, cool.
And one of the questions is, how long, so you were talking about with exercise that if we consciously focus on breathing through our nose, it'll be uncomfortable at first. How long does it take for that to begin to change?
So I think I felt the change. So I went for a run. I had my nose, I had my mouth closed. I thought it was super hard. And the next time I ran, I felt like, oh, I can run a little longer this time. So it's like maybe a few meters or maybe a few minutes longer. So you will feel to pick up the benefits quite fast, but to go from doing an exercise in this capacity with mouth breathing to nose breathing, it can take up to 3 to 6 months. But 3 to 6 months, then you're doing it quite intense. You are really working on your breathing. So it takes some time to come up to the same results, but still it's the long-term results. And if you start to practice this and you have a game, for example, where you need to hit a record, you can still breathe through your mouth when you need to, but you could push a little longer and harder without feeling breathless. So yeah, it can take some time, but the more you become aware of your breath, the more you will pick it up during the day. So you might notice that you're holding your breath when you work, which you didn't notice before, or you might notice that you're breathing through your mouth, which you didn't notice before, just because you become more aware and more curious about your breath. So in that way, you can start to tweak your breath during the day, and that helps your process of becoming a better breather.
Okay, fabulous, fabulous. You can believe it. We've actually gone over our time.
Yeah, no worries.
Let's take one more question. Let's see. Would you suggest using medical tape over your mouth while you're sleeping? We were talking about that mouth breathing during the evening.
Yeah, I have a bunch upstairs at next to my bed. So I do a mouth tape. My husband mouth tapes as well. I got my whole company to mouth tape. Maybe they just said it. Yeah, so mouth tape makes sure that you have your mouth closed during the night. So it's like doing a breath practice for 8 hours without lifting your hand. So it's like for free, you're doing a breath practice, breathing through your nose. So yeah, I will definitely recommend it. You can start to tape your lips, and then you might wake up the first night or the first week without it on your lips because you've taken it off in your sleep. Or if you're not comfortable falling asleep with your mouth taped shut, you can just try it out during the day when you're in front of your computer or when you go for a walk, for example. Just try it for 5 minutes. And then maybe you do the next week or the next day, you do a little longer, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then if you feel ready and if you feel comfortable and safe, you can start to tape your mouth shut during the night. But that's a very simple way of correcting your breathing to functional breathing. When you really you can't keep track of your breathing when you sleep. You can't like remind yourself to breathe through your nose.
Right.
Super helpful tips. And one thing to think about if you're new to it, make sure you take the tape off with your tongue. Don't just rip it off because it might hurt your lips. So that's a very, very important tips, because people stop if they don't know this. They're like, oh, it didn't work. It ripped, like it ruined my lips. So it won't if you just stick out your tongue and use your tongue to take it off.
That's such a good tip. Thank you so much. Okay, and so to wrap it up, as we practice these things, these different ways of breathing, become more conscious, it takes a lot of energy to kind of become conscious of it. Do you find that after a while people are kind of unlearning their bad habits and just naturally they're kind of breathing more functionally, or is this a conscious practice that we have to do throughout our life?
Again, coming back to the awareness, you don't have to put energy to like, in the beginning, yes, you can set an alarm or a timer, and it could just be like every 30 minutes. If you tend to mouth breathe a lot, you can set like every 30 minutes or every 50 minutes, it goes off and it's just a reminder for you to like, am I breathing through my nose or my mouth? And the simple way is to just close your mouth and then you're good to go. If you don't want to set an alarm, if you feel like this talk was interesting, you will start to pick up on your breathing habits naturally, because it's just your attention starts to go there. So I don't sit 24 hours, like my whole waking day, thinking about my breath. I sort of do it automatically, but it doesn't take too much of my energy. I just notice, okay, I'm breathing fast, breathe slower. Usually I don't feel like I'm breathing through my mouth because I've gotten so used to not doing it. But when I do, I really notice it straight away. I'm like, whoa, I'm breathing through my mouth now. So for example, when I was sick last week and I was breathing through my mouth during night, and it was not a good night's sleep. So yeah, and you will start to pick up and it will become a habit. So for example, when I'm stressed, I activate a breathing habit not on like as a habit. So I don't think about that I'm doing it. It's the sound of the breath. So I add an ujjayi breath. It's also called resistance breathing. You just create a little sound, but with your with nose breathing. So I hear myself activating that breath when I get stressed. Not that I said like, I need to activate this breath now because I'm stressed. I do it automatically. So no, the more you think about it, the more it will become natural. And the more you practice, the also more it will become natural.
Well, that's perfect. That's great motivation to really put this to work. And I thank you so much for bringing us all of these very actionable tips to help optimize our performance through our breath. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
Okay, great. And then for our audience, we hope that this episode really supports your entrepreneurial journey in being an entrepreneurial leader in whatever you are doing. So whether you are starting a venture, whether you're transferring to a four-year university, whether you are focused on getting that job or working that job that you're very motivated to have, in all of these circumstances, being entrepreneurial supports you, and using your breath effectively to optimize your performance makes you get the most out of your effort. So we're all about putting passion to action this semester with the podcast. So be sure to tune in next week when we'll help you with more of the same. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you again, Elsa. Take care, everybody.